What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the conference championship weekend college football betting preview. I'm Stucky. Joining me, as always, my BBOC fellow co-host, Colin Wilson.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast.
All right, here we go.
Colin, a lot to get to today. We're going to go through all 9 conference championship games. No time to spare, so let's just dive right in. I don't even care how you're doing. I hope your holiday season is going well.
Well,
But
I tell you what
yeah,
everybody should be doing. We should be getting naps, right? Because once the bowl games are announced and the point spreads are out, it's transfer portal. It's coaches that don't care because they're recruiting or whatever. They're recruiting the transfer portal. You're going to do your tracker, your transfer portal tracker. We're going to have to keep up with news on every single bowl team. It's going to be an absolute mess. And yes, just so you guys know the schedule for BBOC next week, there's actually a bowl game the same day as Army Navy. So we have to like rush our bowl confidence pieces. So get a nap this weekend because the hard work is next week.
we will have an episode next week early. We'll cover Army Navy, that bowl game on Saturday, the next bowl game on Tuesday, and then we'll have another episode that comes out Tuesday afternoon to cover the bowl games the rest of the week and the college football playoff first round games. And then we'll obviously have 3 or 4 more bowl and playoff preview episodes throughout the rest of the season before we do our final recap episode. And you know what? Just because I'm a glutton for punishment and love you guys so much, we're going to do a recap episode this weekend, and we'll open the voicemail up for one final weekend. So if you want to yell at us one final time, 959 bad beat. But let's dive right in to the conference championships. Let's start. We'll go in chronological order. Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. Western Kentucky at Jacksonville State. This is a rematch of last weekend. And for what it's worth, rematches in conference championship games, we have a couple this weekend. UNLV, Boise State, Ohio, Miami of Ohio, Georgia, Texas. Historically, rematches in conference championship games, no edge. Seems to be odds makers do a good job of pricing in any, revenge or adjustment angle. 33-33 against the spread. But the team that lost the first meeting has 67% of them have improved their scoring margin from the first meeting by an average of about a touchdown per game. So there does seem to be some signal that the team that lost, which makes some sense, would make some adjustments. Now, in this case, Jacksonville State lost last weekend by 1 on a 50-yard field goal. Western Kentucky has a pretty good kicker in Carnero. And Jacksonville State didn't have a lot to play for. They actually didn't have anything to play for. They knew at the time they were going to host this game. And the big news here, and the news to watch, is that their quarterback, Huff, got banged up in that game. And it's a big difference, I think, between him and Tyler Huff and Logan Smothers. I was watching that game. I had some money on Western Kentucky. He hurt his ankle, but I think part of it was precautionary because they weren't playing for anything. He went to the tent, but he looked okay. They say he's limited. He's going to be a game time decision. I'm operating under the assumption that he's going to be okay. And because of that, I like the over. So I bet this over 57.5. As of right now, that's where the total sits. Jacksonville State's a 5-point favorite. The Western Kentucky offense, a little downswing late in the year. Not really sure what happened. So I'm just chalking it up to just some short-term variance. I mean, they lost River Helms. He wasn't that important. Other than that, they're fully healthy. But when I look at this matchup, number one, the number, I think that this should be closer to 62-63, which is where it closed at last week. And Jacksonville State, number one, they pulled Huff when he got hurt. They weren't showing much. They were just running it straight ahead. Now, that still works against Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky can't defend the run. They're 117th rush success rate, outside the top 100 EPA per rush. Their linebackers are bad. Their D-line can be pushed around. They're 108th in third down D. So And Jacksonville State's only 9 of 20 on fourth down. There's some positive regression coming there because I think they're going to be able to get a push. They can run the ball. They're a really good running team. West Kentucky's strength is in their secondary, although Upton Stout, who's like their pro prospect, he got hurt last game. Not sure. He's plays in the slot for them. He's really good against the run too. So if he's out, that hurts. So I think Jacksonville State's gonna be able to run the ball at will. I think Huff will be okay. I think they'll feed Stewart. And while their pass catchers aren't great, I don't they're not gonna need them much here. I think they're gonna run up and down the field. On the other side of the ball, Jacksonville State, they're not great in coverage. They don't have a great pass rush. They give up a ton of pass explosives that I think Western Kentucky can take advantage of. The question is, can Western Kentucky finish in the red zone? That's definitely a concern with their type of offense. But I think that they'll move the ball through the air. And Jacksonville State defense got a little beat up last week. They played 90 snaps. And Western Kentucky moved the ball. They just couldn't finish drives. So my only concern about this over, and I just think we're getting some value because of what the score was last week. It ended up being 19-17. But a lot of their offensive output for both teams came against like the bottom of the barrel in the Conference USA, and the bottom of the barrel is bad. And both their strength of schedule is around 130th. But since I make this total where it closed at last week, I'm on the over. I think you like a side here.
Yeah, I think you have a decision to make whether you're going to back the Jacksonville side or the Jacksonville team total over, because I don't consider this a rematch. Whether Tyler Huff was hurt or not, bringing in Logan Smothers, it was the first drive in the second half. Tyler Huff went out. That essentially ended Jacksonville State's whole purpose in the game. Trey Stewart was limited to just 27 carries in the game. I'm sorry. He ended with 20 carries in the game. He generally has
like 30 this game.
Oh, yeah, he can get up to 35. I mean, he only played 33 snaps. He only had 20 carries. He was not a factor in this game. He generally averages about 50 snaps per game on the offense. They didn't use him at all. And when him and Tyler Huff get going on the ground, it is just a spectacle. It's a light show. And absolutely, Western Kentucky's defense is not going to be able to handle any of that. Plus, let me say this. Knowing that Jacksonville State purposely took out their most skilled players on offense that just create absolute burning highlight reels on the ground, Jacksonville State still had the post-game win expectancy of 63% in that game. Like, they didn't really lose the game in the box score. They had
and they were just being completely vanilla.
Completely vanilla, and averaged a half yard more overall yards per play. I can't make a case like why. I mean, I think the only narrative that's hanging out there is that Rich Rod's getting calls from West Virginia, Purdue, North Carolina, UCF. Like, he won't admit it, but I don't think that affects this game whatsoever. I think they are dialed in, locked in. I think maybe they were, sending out proxies last week to find out what Western Kentucky ultimately wants to do in this game in the championship. I think it was just such a great victory by Western Kentucky and that 50-yard kick there at the end. But I just think it's going to be similar results. I think Caden Beltcamp is going to get his 300, his 28 for 47 last week, just one TD. They were horrible in offensive finishing drives. They had 22 first downs in the game, but they only averaged 2.6 points on scoring opportunities. That's a drive that goes past the 44-yard line. So
yeah, that's a problem for them when the field shrinks. They're also really bad in short down situations, right. So
they're just
that concerns me a bit. But I think they can hit enough explosives to get me enough points to put this over. But you think you like Jacksonville State on the side, right?
I like Jacksonville State on the side. I got 3.5. I think it's going to come down a couple books back down to 4. I think that's where I set it. I think that's where you'd want to buy it. And if you don't like that, and if you're uncomfortable with that, and think that Western Kentucky can actually get something going here in a shootout, which Jacksonville State sometimes falls into. I mean, their defense doesn't produce a pass rush. I would take the Jacksonville State team total over if you're not comfortable with the Jacksonville State side.
All right, moving on to the Mountain West Championship, 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox, Friday night in Boise, Idaho, a rematch of a game earlier this year between UNLV and Boise State. UNLV will look to continue their road success. They're 6-0 on the road this year. Their only loss is at home by 5 to Boise and by 3 to Syracuse in overtime. Boise's only loss at Oregon by 3. Yeah, Boise leaking oil a bit down the stretch, but that premium, like you're paying for UNLV here because it's the same price that this line closed at when the game was in Vegas. There's a couple things worth noting here. Boise's that could make Boise intriguing. I make this spread pretty close to where it is. I have Boise to win the Mountain West. I played some UNLV at +4 as a potential hedge because I do like UNLV in this game. even though I'm pretty close to the price. But State did get healthier on the offensive line. They got Carrion at guard and Randolph at center back late in the year. Upgrades to what they had. They were dealing with a lot of offensive line injuries. Their right tackle, Matoyer, he played well last game. That's been musical chairs there. So maybe they figure that out. So the offensive line might be in better shape. Maddox Madsen, 21 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, but 6 big-time throws, 12 turnover-worthy plays. UNLV top 10 turnover margin team. They take the ball away. They didn't in the first meeting. Wouldn't be surprised if there's some takeaways here. It's an aggressive D. They will give up some explosives. Boise, really good on third downs, but UNLV, an elite third down defense. I think just overall, when I look at this, I think UNLV has the better overall defense. You got Catalan, Elad, Baldwin, Grimes, Oliver on the back end. Woodard's a stud at linebacker. They have some capable pass rushers. They kept, and they are capable of keeping Genty in check. They did that in the first meeting. And you got to remember, I know Boise State won that game, but they went 4-4 on fourth down. UNLV missed a kick. They gave Boise a 7-yard touchdown drive on the lone turnover of the game, and they still led in the fourth quarter. My questions for this game, can someone else step up to help Ricky White? Because the Boise State secondary is vulnerable. And there's going to be lots of sacks and tackles for losses, I think, on both sides. But can Haj just limit them against this Boise pass rush? That was a problem in the first meeting. Someone else just needs to step up, help Ricky White, because you can move the ball through the air against this Boise defense. I also think, just from an adjustment standpoint, UNLV, they lost that first game. I like Barry Odom in that role here. I think this game's going to go right down to the wire. I think Boise is vulnerable. All the pressure, too, is on Boise. Like, they're assumed that they're going to the college football playoff. They're at home here. UNLV has shown that they like playing in this role of being on the road. So I like the Rebels. Part of it is because I have a future on Boise, but at 4 or better, small bet on that side. I think this game goes right down to the wire. These are two pretty evenly matched teams.
Yeah, we can dust off the tape of the Mountain West preview from the summer. I loved UNLV 5-1. I have a couple of those tickets. I will not be hedging them at all. I love UNLV in this spot for a number of reasons. First off, when you go back to that game and they played each other, UNLV left that game with a 61% post-game win expectancy. They might have lost by 5 points, but there was a couple things in the box score that says that UNLV should have probably won that game. Boise finished that game with an 8-minute drive ending in 3 kneels. So it was actually a very impressive methodical that got them out of Dodge and got them that victory. But Broncos lost the overall yards per play, the field position, special teams. That's what provided the edge in that game. And I'm not sure that kind of thing can be replicated. Haj Malik Williams was asked this week, what's the big difference between now and week 9 when you guys played against Boise? And he said communication and protection with the offensive line is just night and day. It's completely improved, and it's going to be a factor in this game. And I believe him. When you look at Haj Malik Williams this year, he has 1 turnover-worthy play and 80 dropbacks that have pressure. He has been very good under pressure. So if Boise is able to get through and try to get after Malik, after Haj, it's not going to work. Now, when you look at the offense, the go-go offense of Brennan Marion, it's going to be a lot of man, a lot of power, a lot of pulling linemen all over the place. And Boise's just not very good at defending man-run concepts, about a 42% success rate in that. And UNLV is probably going to expose them on the ground, mostly because of this factor. Boise State is horrendous in tackling, 132nd graded by PFF in tackling. Even worse, broken tackles allowed outside the top 100. So when UNLV, whether it's Williams or it's Ricky White, when they get to the second level, they're able to break off more tackles and make even more explosive plays. Now, and that's just a characteristic of an Eric Shenander 3-2-6 defense everywhere he's been, whether it's UCF or Nebraska. I think when you go to the other side of the ball, really the handicap is like, how do you handle Genty? I think UNLV did pretty good handling Genty. They only gave up 9 missed tackles against Boise, Genty. And when you look at what Genty did in the 3 games after that, he created 40 missed tackles in the next 3 games. So Genty has, the ability to bull you over, to juke you, and do all that. But UNLV actually posted one of the best numbers in broken tackles allowed. So with UNLV being top 10 in havoc, thanks to forced fumbles, they're coming after Genty. They're going to try to rip the ball out. They don't miss. They didn't miss before. They had a higher post-game win expectancy, they had a higher overall yards per play. I don't think the special teams and field position can save Boise this time. I like UNLV to win outright.
I think UNLV too overall has a better special teams,
Mm-hmm.
just season long. Boise has had some issues on special teams this season. All right, let's move on to the American Championship, Friday night, 8 Eastern on ABC between Tulane and Army. Tulane is a 5-point road favorite, total sitting at 45.5. As a result of Tulane's loss to Memphis, not only did it cost them a shot at the college football playoff, but it also meant Army gets to host this game in West Point Friday night. It'll be cold, freezing conditions for what it's worth. Unders. Say that again.
And windy, 13 to
And
15.
win.
Yep.
Unders in games with freezing temperatures, which this will be, in conference championships have gone 7-3, staying under by about a touchdown per game on average. Couple interesting against the spread nuggets here that I wanted to bring up on a weekend, by the way, where it's the first weekend where conference championship weekend, where we don't have a favorite of a touchdown or more since 2006. Tulane's John Sumrall, very, very good as a favorite. 19-7 against the spread, 73%, 11-0 against the spread on the road as a favorite. However, teams that lost as a double-digit favorite the game before their conference championship weekend, their conference championship game, 5-10 straight up and against the spread. Army, Monken, as you would imagine, very good as an underdog, 39-24-2 against the spread, 61.9%. Over the past 10 years, service academies 96-66 against the spread in the first half as underdogs, close to 60%. It's also worth noting Sumrall has had a lot of success against service academies over the past 3 seasons, including a pair of shutouts, including one that happened earlier this season against Navy. Faced service academy 3 times between Troy and Tulane, 9 total points, 2 shutouts. Pretty impressive. So when I look at this game, I've had trouble figuring out Tulane all season. I like what I would like in this game. I would look at the under. It's come down a little bit, but anything over 45, I think, is worth a look. I also liked Army first quarter plus 1.5. One of the reasons for that, show a tad bit of value in the number overall for the game. Little concerned about the Army defense. Like the Army defense has played an extremely weak strength of schedule, especially compared to Tulane. And their metrics are bad still, like outside the top 100 in success rate. I don't know if their secondary can hold up. They can be pushed around up front. Tulane has really talented receivers. Mekhi Hughes can run the ball. But this game might fly by. These are 2 of the slowest teams in the country. These are 2 of the most run-heavy teams in the country. But I am afraid of like the Army defense holding up for the full game. But getting plus points in the first quarter in a game that could have like 2 possessions in the first quarter is intriguing to me. Like it ends 0-0. And Army's been so good on their first drive of the game. Played 11 games this year, touchdowns on 9 of their opening drives, a field goal in the other. The only time they didn't score was against Notre Dame. Tulane has been good in the first quarter as well, for what it's worth. And the Army defense, they have been getting like in the red zone. They've been getting lucky on 4th downs. So it's does that all that regression finally hit? But I think I'm going to add a little bit on Army in the first quarter, because I think they're going to come out their hair on fire at home. This is a huge game for them. Conference championship, their first year in a conference.
Healthy.
And what's that?
And they're healthy.
And healthy. And where's Tulane at mentally? I don't know. Like you have coaching rumors with their coordinator, head coach, but they were thinking, hey, we win out. We're going to the college football. We're going to have a good shot at going to the college football playoff if Boise loses. Now, you're not even hosting your conference championship game. You can't go to the college football playoff. Do they potentially come out a little flat? Were they maybe not as focused in their prep for the triple option? What are you seeing here?
Well, they definitely weren't prepared for Memphis. Not that they needed that game or cared about that game, but the offense didn't wake up till towards the middle of the game. And I think you're right. At some point, Tulane's going to figure it out. Mekhi Hughes, 4 yards after first contact. He should be fresh. He only had 9 rushing attempts against Memphis. Generally has like 25 per game. And look, I can't say anything good about this Army defense. Not after that Notre Dame game. I mean, this is a rushing attack, a heavy Tulane rushing attack that should do some damage here. I think I agree with you, though, in the fact that I wanted a first half under. I think we're 23 and a half going down to 22 and a half. I cannot get over 26 degrees and 15-mile-an-hour winds. It's got a Miami feeling to it, right? Like I haven't looked at the roster of Tulane, but it's got to be filled with kids from Louisiana and Texas, right? I mean, this is some brutal weather, and it's just going to hit these kids in the face and take them a while to adjust. Tulane,
And wind will definitely help Army's secondary for
mhm.
those deep shots because, with Brown and Mario Williams, like the Tulane, they run it, and they'll set up some deep shots. And they have some talented receivers that are going to have a speed edge on the outside. Wind will definitely help suppress some of that explosive passing.
And I think Tulane's going to have success shutting down some of Army's attack. I mean, they faced Navy. Tulane faced Navy's. I know it's a different kind of offense, different run concepts, but they faced Navy 3 weeks ago. Tulane stuffed 37% of 33 rushing attempts. Navy failed to create an explosive drive. Quarterback Braxton Woodson for Navy, who's kind of subbing in, he had 10 play action passes. It's always important to check out what you do against play action. Out of 10 play action passes for Navy, Tulane allowed only 3 catches for a grand total of 13 yards. I don't expect Army to beat Tulane here on the play action pass. And of course, Army does have a heavy amount of man blocking rush concepts, not just the triple anymore. They do line up and try to play power ball. And Tulane has struggled against man, but they've dominated a lot of other run concepts. So I think there's an avenue for Army to have a little bit of success and move the ball. But other than that, I don't see them getting a gotcha on them with the play action pass. Tulane's very good at stuffing anything that's not man run concept. So, for me, I think this is very low scoring. I think the spread's too high. I think it should be closer under a field goal, not up at the 5 that it's at right now. But for me personally, like I have an Army 23-1 to win the AAC. I'm going to be playing Tulane live trying to get that back. So if you have an Army, I know we had some questions out there on Twitter. If you have an Army ticket to win the AAC, I would play it live because I think the number's too high anyways. So you got to wait for that to come down live and then try to get at least your initial investment back on your conference future. But for me, if I had to play it straight up, no futures, I would take Army in the 5. I would definitely take a first half under, which I still think I'm going to do before we get off this podcast.
Yeah, Army, by the way, without are healthy outside of they lost Kyle Lewis, their defensive end, to a season-ending injury. All right, let's move on to Saturday. Let's start the Big 12 championship between Iowa State and Arizona State. Saturday, noon Eastern on ABC. Arizona State's a 2-point favorite here. This game will be played in Jerry World in Arlington, Texas. Total sitting at 49.5. I've gone back and forth in this game a million times. So I have an Iowa State future. I know we gave that out on the pod. I know a lot of you do too. I initially bought some back, took some Arizona State money line early in the week. Basically have like a free roll on Arizona State plus 300 and Iowa State plus 600. But because I initially thought Arizona State was going to run the ball. Scatterbo was going to be the difference. But after digging in the last couple of days, I'm starting to come around on Iowa State. I do think that this line should be closer to a pick without Jordan Tyson. The loss of Jordan Tyson is just huge.
Yes, it is.
He was, 1,000-yard receiver, season-ending injury. He's who Levitt looks for on third down. He was their explosive passing option. And without him, Iowa State, which is a run funnel defense, they want you to run, bend but don't break. They can now dedicate more resources to stopping Scatterbo. Scatterbo's still going to have success running the ball, but I think it makes them much easier to defend. And on the other side of the ball, this Arizona State team, they don't really generate an elite pass rush. And Iowa State has 2 Jordan Tysons and Higgins and Noel. And what I kept coming back to is and this is, if I look back at all the teams that Arizona State plays, this is the best passing attack. I mean, you could argue Texas Tech could beat Arizona State, that Arizona State will play. The fact that this game is played in Jerry World, I think favors Iowa State, which is weird because they play outdoors. Arizona State plays in Tempe, and but Arizona State is built more like a team without Tyson that would rather play this game in like Ames. And Iowa State this year is built more like a team that would thrive on a fast track in a temperature controlled environment because they can't really run the ball. And it's all on Becht and their two really good receivers. Becht should have time here. And I think ultimately that's going to be the difference. Arizona State's going to move the ball. Scatterbo is going to get his, but I think Iowa State will hold up in the red zone, force enough field goals, and then they'll hit enough explosives on offense. I think it'll be a super tight game. Something else to keep in mind, Arizona State penalties could be big. Iowa State doesn't get penalized. Arizona State has issues there. And Arizona State special teams, and again, it should be close, are a disaster. I think they're like, I should look at this up. I think they're like on field goal kicks this year. They are 4 of 11 from 30 plus. That's rough. So their special teams are rough, but I think the loss of Tyson is very key here. So I'm starting to lean towards Iowa State. I might buy back some of my buyback on Arizona State, but basically a coin flipish game. I think that this should be. I don't think the Arizona State deserves to be a favorite here without the loss of Tyson indoors, which I think favors the Cyclones. What are your thoughts here?
A lot of positives for Iowa State in this game, in my opinion. Not only, I mean, I think the game in Dallas is because, by the way, I-35 connects Ames all the way down to DFW. And outside of the blue bloods of college football, nobody travels like Iowa and Iowa State. I think Iowa State had a game out at UNLV a couple years ago. Might have been 90% Iowa State fans in a regular season game. They're going to travel and they're going to fill this place up. And I think it's going to be predominantly Iowa State fans. Once you get past that, Kenny Dillingham right now is the hot guy at the blackjack table. A bunch of wins in a row, 6 wins this season by a possession or less. Iowa State, they've had to have a 3-game sweep after back-to-back losses to Texas Tech and Kansas. So it's one of those things where Arizona State's just hot at the blackjack table, and Iowa State has had to claw for their life after those 2 consecutive wins. So it's just 2 different mindsets, in my opinion. And like, what is the emotional hangover of the last couple of weeks that's been going on with Arizona State? You have to come down from that at some point. Now, saying that
Iowa State in a way, it's like I think that they could play looser here.
Yeah.
Like a couple weeks ago, they didn't think there was going to be any shot that they were going to be here. They didn't control their own destiny. And then here they are with a chance to go to the college football playoff in a small underdog role.
So I think the biggest cap of this game is what is Iowa State going to do on defense? Because John Heacock, the defensive coordinator, runs that 3-3-5 stack, a very light box. And now that we know that Jordan Tyson is out, it's going to be Cam Skateabo. Like that, you're going to have to figure out how to scheme and get around that because there's no passing game here. I mean, the best catchers are now tight ends Shimon Mateer and Cam Skateabo. That's it. When you look at the wide receivers, like the next set of wide receivers after Jordan Tyson, it's really bad. Like Xavier Gilroy and Melquan Stovall have had 12 catches in the last 5 games, a complete non-factor. Something else.
Here's to sum it up. Jordan Tyson, 75 catches, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. The rest of the receivers on the team, 41 catches, 634 yards, 4 touchdowns.
Right.
I mean, Tyson's basically doubled the production of all the other receivers combined.
Well, there's another one too. And this is all in the preview that'll be out on Action Network this week. When it comes down to third down and red zone targets, Jordan Tyson up around 40. No other wide receiver on the team has even gotten to 10. So, I mean, there's just going to be critical downs and distances here where Levitt's going to have to throw the ball, and there's just not going to be anybody there that he's familiar with on third downs and red zone attacks. So it's really the crux of the game. Like the 3-3-5 stack, it doesn't blitz that much. It's not very good against the run, but that's the only thing that you have to defend here for Iowa State. Cam Skateabo quickly flying up the rankings of our BBOC gambling Heisman, but Iowa State has to find a way. And there is good news here. There is a hidden gem that put me on Iowa State here. Arizona State with Kenny Dillingham and Skateabo only runs outside zone. They are predominantly outside zone. There's only one run concept that Iowa State can defend at a normal success rate level, and that's outside zone. Why is that? Because that 3-3-5 stack is dependent on setting the edge off of the tackles at the 5 technique. And that is exactly what they're going to be able to do against outside zone. And that's why Iowa State has more success with that than they do against any other run concept. And if you don't believe it, Kansas State tried to run outside zone against Iowa State last weekend, 26% success rate in 30 attempts.
And they're a good running team.
Yeah, they're a great running team. So they failed. Iowa State improving rush defense with a run concept that gives them an advantage here. When you go to the other side of the ball, you're right. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, it's all been explosives. 2.6 yards per route run. They're the ones that are going to have to carry these points and these explosives. Rocco Beck's numbers, we'll talk about this in bowl season. He's really had a dip in some of his explosives and his efficiency. His turnover-worthy play rate's up from 2.6 to 3.9%. He's had 7 turnover-worthy plays in the last 3 games versus just 1 big-time throw. He's not really moving in the right direction after having unbelievable numbers last year. And then Abu Sama, almost a non-factor this year, less than 3 yards after first contact. The good news is this offense does not get stopped. They're 3rd in offensive momentum killer rate. They're 25th in havoc allowed. They're just, they're not as explosive as they were last year's version, but they get the job done here, and I'm on Iowa State.
And I think that they have the potential to be more explosive though, because Arizona State doesn't get a great passer, so they're going to be playing on this fast track, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
all right, let's move on to
There's a difference in AT&T Stadium than playing in Ames, playing in Arrowhead, Kansas City, in shitty weather. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the MAC championship, noon Eastern on ESPN in Detroit, Michigan. Miami of Ohio is a 1.5-point favorite here. Total sitting at 44.5. This game will be played at Ford Field. Would normally have looked at the under here. These are, I think, 2 teams that play conservative. I just fast track MAC craziness. It's hard to go under 44.5. It would be under or nothing though for me. I don't really have a side here yet. I lean Miami of Ohio. I just haven't been able to figure out Ohio all year. This is the first time in 7 years I don't have a MAC future. A future in the MAC championship game. It's very sad. I kind of want to boycott this game, but I can't because I love the MAC. But the reason I didn't have a MAC future this year, and I lost my win total, I didn't see this Ohio thing coming. They had nothing returning. Think about all the guys they lost, and there's like Rourke who's excelling at Indiana. Like I did not see this coming. This is a team that was decimated by the transfer portal, but they hit.
They were the lowest.
Guys they brought in.
They were lowest in TARP, I think. They were the lowest in returning production. Yeah.
They had nothing returning. It was a great job by Tim Allen. I haven't been able to catch up to Ohio. So I still make Miami of Ohio slightly over a field goal favored here. Miami of Ohio is peaking right now. They will have a special teams advantage, and that's important because they win. That's how they win games. And Chuck Martin will play it conservative, will punt it on 4th and 1 at the 40, rely on his special teams. Ohio special teams are not great. The key to this game for me is I do think Miami of Ohio can throw on Ohio. Their pass defense isn't great. And you got to remember Ohio, one of the reasons they're here. They've had a great year, but they didn't play anybody. I mean, here's the teams they played in conference play. They played Central Michigan. They won by 2. They lost to Miami of Ohio 30-20, by the way, earlier this year. And they were down 30-6 in that game. They beat Buffalo, Kent State, Eastern Michigan, Ball State, the corpse of Ball State at the end of the year. Their one impressive win was at Toledo, but I'm not very high on that Toledo team. Like they didn't have to play Northern Illinois. They didn't have to play Bowling Green. They lost to Miami of Ohio. That's part of the reason that they're here. The key to this game, though, and it didn't happen in the first game, is can Ohio stay in it early? Because they need to run the ball. They have one receiver. That's it. And they need to run the ball. You can run the ball a little bit on Miami of Ohio. But if they get behind, because I think that Gabbert can have some success throwing on this Ohio secondary, and Miami of Ohio is going to be well prepped, well schooled defensively. They just know if Ohio's in a passing game state, you just cover Coleman Owen, their only receiver, and then Parker Navarro is going to make mistakes. I mean, this is a guy, he's got 10 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He's been benched twice, once against Miami of Ohio. He gets confused by coverages. He needs to be in like a handheld game state. He got benched against Morgan State earlier this year after he threw 3 picks in a quarter. That's Morgan State. He's benefited from a really easy schedule. Ohio hasn't won a MAC title since 1968, I believe, which is stunning. I lean Miami of Ohio here, but I would have stronger conviction if I had a good read on this Ohio team all year, and I just haven't. What do you see here?
If Coleman Owen takes our money, maybe we'll reconsider and put him in the Gam. I'm sorry, our All American first and second team. We'll review that next week for everybody. So the thing for me is when you have teams that play against each other and you have a rematch, which we have here, I go back and do a comb over. Like the Western Kentucky Jacksonville State doesn't count. Jacksonville State didn't need it, didn't care, didn't play their starters, so you just kind of throw the box score out. But when you go to this one, it was a a big game in the middle of the schedule that both of these teams needed. It wasn't even close. You mentioned Miami of Ohio was up 30-6 at the beginning of the fourth quarter in this game. You look at the post game, you see 30-20, the final score. Post game win expectancy, Miami of Ohio, 100%. Wasn't even close. Brett Gabbert, 14 of 21 with 3 TDs. Keon Mosey on the ground, 111 yards, 7 yards per carry. Ohio coughed up the ball. They set up short field position for one of the Miami touchdowns. But other than that, the Redhawks took them to the woodshed. Miami nearly doubled the Bobcats in overall yards per play in that game. So the question here is, because it's like I've kind of been sitting down because this Miami of Ohio team came out, got hit hard on open. There's been some trickle back to two. Waiting in the weeds to get a money line here on Miami of Ohio. I want to pay to make Ohio beat me because they weren't even close in this initial game. And you have to think that both teams have won out since that game, right? Ohio's won every game since. Miami Ohio's won every game since. There's no big injury concerns on either side of the people that were playing in that game before. So I'm essentially paying to say this happens again. Redhawks 100% post game win expectancy. I mean, the doubled their overall yards per play. Give me the Redhawks.
Our producer, who is Chuck Martin's biggest fan, will be happy to hear that. All right, let's move on to the SEC Championship Saturday, 4 Eastern on ABC in Atlanta between Texas and Georgia, a rematch of earlier this year when Georgia won at Texas by 15. This will be played on a fast track. Historically, SEC championship games have gone over more times than under. I like Texas here. I can't wait to get your thoughts. I played them 2.5. I might come back on Georgia based on how the game goes. What have we seen all year? Georgia goes down in the first quarter. Every game. I mean, except the Texas game. And this Georgia team will be dangerous in the playoffs. They're like in the most hyped up need to win spots. They're going to be dangerous. Kirby will get them ready. But all year, name one game where Georgia was completely dominant start to finish on offense and defense. Like, this is a team, their defense isn't as good as it's been. You can run on them. And Texas now has found its running game. I mean, you go back to this Georgia team, like second half against Clemson was good. Kentucky, they won by 1. Alabama, the second half was good. They were down big early. The Auburn game, guess that was a good effort. Mississippi State, like, not dominant. The Texas game, the offense wasn't great. Against Florida, meh. Ole Miss, they get blown out. Tennessee, fairly impressive. UMass, I mean, you're down 7. You let UMass go 8 yards on the field. Against Georgia Tech last week, you should have lost. Georgia Tech loses. Your offense is dead. You can't stop in the first half. Georgia Tech loses all its defensive backs to injury, and you come back, you win in 8 overtimes. Why do I like Texas here? Well, there's just issues with this Georgia team right now, specifically on offense. They can't run the ball at all.
Mm-hmm.
They're incapable of running it. Part of that, and I don't think many realize, their offensive line is all hurt, and they can't run block. Wilson's dealing with an injury. Fairchild, Ratledge had surgery. He's back, but I don't think he's 100%. Freeling's now hurt. They're all going to play, but they're just not healthy. And all their backs, they're down 4 of their top 5 backs. And then their receivers are not that talented. Right. And then I look at the Texas side. Who has more team speed at wide receiver and running back? It's clearly Texas.
Yeah.
On this fast track, I think that benefits them in this. I think the Arch Manning potential package, you need a running quarterback against Georgia. That's what concerns me about yours. But the Arch Manning package, that could be beneficial here. The adjustments that Texas needs to make. Georgia came out very aggressive on defense, kind of threw a wild card out there. Well, Texas saw that. I think this game also just maybe means a little bit more to Texas. First year in the SEC, revenge for getting embarrassed on their home field. I think they're going to come out with their hair on fire. We've seen Georgia not do that. This isn't a must win. It's not like the biggest game. Like they're in the playoff already. And so when I look, I just go down the line. Texas, much more reliable offensive line. I know Banks is hurt left tackle, but that kid who came in last week, they were fine against Texas A&M.
Yep.
They have the better defense. That's been the one constant for Texas all year is their dominant defense. Georgia can't run the ball. I can't see Georgia throwing the ball with a ton of success on known passing situations with their weapons. And Texas has better weapons, more speed. Georgia does have a special teams edge, big net putting edge. So maybe they win the special teams battle. But even if Georgia's able to move the ball, Texas elite red zone defense. So special teams, maybe Kirby pulls out one of his master motivational speeches. The game is played in Atlanta, but we've seen all year this Georgia team start slow. I think Sark will have a good script. Bobo does not, and there's just so many limitations on this Georgia offense right now. I bet if Kirby could, and he couldn't do this, but I bet Kirby would prefer to forfeit this game and rest up for the next couple weeks and get ready for the college football playoff. So I like Texas here. Play the -2.5. I think they come out hot. Doesn't mean I might look to come back on Georgia. They've shown it all year. They do have the ability to come back. They can make really good adjustments. But I play Texas. What are your thoughts?
If I got to hear Kirby say grit and resilience to describe this team, he never said that the past 3 years, right? I think that is his way of acknowledging this team is just not there. It's not been what they've had from the form of the last 3 years. Let's get a bet out of the way. Let's get it out of the way real quick before I talk about X's and O's on offense and defense. We are betting Texas first quarter. I mean, this whole thing of fading Georgia in the first quarter has been fun. It's been a lot of fun. Georgia, the entire season, negative scoring differential, -0.4. Texas, completely different in the scripted portion, +7.3, one of the best in the nation. There is a huge difference in how these teams handle scripted portion on both sides of the ball. Texas first quarter is still out there, I think, -120. Please, thank you. I'll take it again. I like that bet.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put in, I don't think I've ever, I'm going to put in a round robin of first quarters this weekend. That'll be fun.
Yeah. I mean, if our read
Army
is right,
and Texas will be in there.
yeah, it's actually going to be an actually interesting weekend for these teams that are already in the playoff to see how much they actually show up. Can you imagine not showing up in your conference championship game if you're Oregon or Georgia? Yeah, Kelvin Banks is at left tackle. He's listed as questionable. We'll see if he's going to play. Trevor Gooseby is the one who came in 125 snaps this season at left tackle. So even if for some reason Kelvin Banks doesn't play, Gooseby was just as good in run blocking and pass protection as Banks was. So don't see a big issue there. Banks has some revenge here if he plays. He's only given up 1 sack this season. It came to Georgia. He's only given up 6 pressures. 2 of them came against Georgia. So if Texas does have their left tackle, he's got some revenge to play for here. I want to start on the Georgia offensive side of the ball because, I'm a little pissed off. I wrote this game up for action, and sometimes I do Twitter search to find some of the plays that I put in my articles. And I tell you what, if I have to see any more Snapchat of Carson Beck, it's just going to be too much.
Oh,
This
God.
guy needs to put a shirt on and get away from the girls. Look, Georgia, their offense has looked clean the last 3 games, but there is a reason for that. Tennessee, UMass, Georgia Tech produced just 19 pressures in 3 games against Carson Beck. Before that, against Texas, Florida, and Ole Miss, Carson Beck saw 37, double. And when he has pressure, he can't set his feet. He can't throw downfield. He looks horrific. But there's another thing that's a problem for the Georgia offense. Georgia leads the nation in drops, 36. 36 drops, more than anybody. The UMasses, the Akrons, everybody of the world does not have as many drops as the targets for Georgia. And with Trevor Etienne not expected to play, I mean, Kirby said at his presser on Monday, he said, listen, he was, mentioned as questionable for Georgia Tech. He was nowhere near close to returning for that game. I don't expect him to be here either. So this game is completely on Beck's arm, which means he needs pass protection, which means, it's a real problem here for this offense. And Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator for Texas, second in defensive finishing drives, first in quality drives. This defense is doing a number on teams. The EPA might be the only avenue for Carson Beck to get this team into scoring position. But do you really want to be in passing downs with Carson Beck? Do you really want him facing pressure here? I mean, Texas is top 10 defense in passing downs success rate and EPA. I'm not sure Georgia can replicate what they did in Austin. They went 6 of 17 on third downs. I think that was a little bit of a fluke when you look at Texas's numbers. When you go to the other side of the ball, when Georgia's on defense, I think Texas, you mentioned Arch Manning's going to come in and run this. I mean, Quinn Ewers had 7 turnover worthy plays against Georgia, right? He's had 15 on the season. Half of them came in one game against Georgia. I think if Sark sees that, you're going to get the hook. I mean, it's got to be the Arch Manning, the Quintravion Wisner zone read. I mean, and Wisner, by the way, 350 rushing yards over the last 2 games against the defenses of Kentucky and Texas A&M. Texas dominated Texas A&M on the ground. They stuffed 13 of 49 attempts. I'm sorry, I'm talking about the Texas offense. The Texas offensive line dominated the Texas A&M defensive line, not something that we expected. They averaged 5 yards per carry. The Aggies defensive line managed just a single sack. The Longhorns converted 8 of 16 on third and fourth down. Just a domination. The only thing that's going to hold this Texas offense back is the fact that Quinn Ewers, he's gone from 1.7 to 4.2% turnover worthy play rate. But I have a feeling he has a quick hook if Sark sees it. I think the defense is going to be in control of Georgia here. I think there's a revenge aspect. Kelvin Banks, the left tackle, has a revenge aspect. There's just too many holes in Georgia right now. The cleanliness, I mean, that Georgia Tech game said everything. They said everything. And the fact that UMass scored 21 points on the Georgia defense, how does that happen? How does that happen in this world? So I like Texas here. I'm starting off with the first quarter. I haven't decided yet. I'm getting in full game, but I like Texas all the way here.
All right, here's one we'll talk about for the least amount of time. Neither of us feel really passionate about it. Marshall at Louisiana. This game, Sun Belt Championship, 7:30 Eastern, ESPN. This will be at the same time as Clemson, SMU, and Penn State, Oregon. ULL 6-point favorite, total 57.5. Marshall 11-1 against the spread, but they're a fraud. They've won 7 straight since going to Braxton at quarterback. But you look at all their box scores, it's like, how do they win this game? They get outgained, they get outplayed, and they, I mean, they're one dominant performance game against Southern Miss. I think ULL is also a fraud. Like, they have all these misleading margin scores, including last week, thanks, against UL Monroe for that late run. I do think Marshall will be able to run the ball on Louisiana. Louisiana's defense is not good. Their run defense is not good.
Dead last in defensive rushing success rate. Dead last.
Yeah. And Marshall can run the ball a bit. But I think Louisiana can run the ball some on Marshall. This is a game, I'll just tell you, I mean, I made it 5-ish. Don't have a strong feel. I mean, there are rumors about Marshall's head coach, Huff.
Yep.
Maybe they're not focused. Sun Belt home field tends to be overrated if you look historically. But this is a game I just said I'd take Louisiana at 3. I'd take Marshall at 7. It's not there. Louisiana also, their red zone D is trash. They can't get off the field. And like Marshall potential running dog here. So that could be intriguing, but at this price range, no hot take. 2 teams that I kind of want to fade. So nothing here for me. Anything for you?
Yeah, I wanted the over, but I projected at 53 and we're sitting at 57. I might go ahead and end up playing it anyways. Maybe we'll get some steam. I'm going to wait till game time, but we mentioned Louisiana, how poor they are on offense against the run. That's going to be a problem with Braylon Braxton, the transfer that came in from Tulsa, and AJ Turner, who the running back is for Marshall. And then when you flip to the other side, you've already mentioned it, like Louisiana is going to be able to run on Marshall, where Marshall's really good on defense is defending the pass. Yeah. So to me, this says over, but can I live with an over with the Thundering Herd? And by the way, Huff is like listening to every job offer out there. Like, I'm not I mean, your focus should be the Sun Belt Championship, but I mean, there's just way too many stories out there that he's in contact and leaning towards certain jobs. So I'll leave it at that. We'll see if an over comes in through the app over the before kickoff.
All right, let's get to the Big Ten championship game between Oregon and Penn State. Oregon 3.5.
Can I get an instant reaction on you for SMU being an ACC championship game? Man, did I take some shit, especially when SMU went out to Nevada and looked like ass, complete ass.
Oh, this is the Big Ten. We'll get to the ACC. That's next. Hold your horses.
Sorry.
Literally hold your ponies. Big Ten championship, Penn State, Oregon, 8 Eastern on CBS. Winner, Oregon wins the 1 seed. Penn State wins and Georgia wins. Penn State's the 1 seed. They would be ranked number 1 for the first time this century, which is stunning. Oregon 3.5 point favorite here, total 50.5. This game will be played in Indianapolis. Uh,
Didn't score an offensive point.
I've already received hate mail. I've already received hate tweets. I've already received hate DMs. I bet Penn State plus 3.5. I'm siding with small game James, who has lost 11 straight against top five teams. It's been a disaster. But number one, I don't think there's any clear elite team this year. I don't know how many times I could say that this year. I've been saying it since week one. I don't think Oregon is one, even though they're undefeated. And I don't have more than a field goal separating these teams. I make this closer to two-ish, a little less than two, 1.5, two. So if you're going to give me the hook here in a game that I make that low, I'm taking it. And why are we assuming that this is big game Dan? Lanning has lost a ton of small sample size, but a ton of big games. And in a way, Oregon, like this game, motivation wise, I'm sure that they're going to want to win. But in a way, they might be better off losing. Get the 5 seed. They lose this game, they get the 5 seed. I mean, you might get Arizona State than Boise State instead of like Ohio State or Tennessee in the second round. They're going to try. I'm just saying. They might end up being better off. But this isn't necessarily like a big game. Both these teams are in the playoffs. Franklin can win this game. He'd still be small game James, people. I make this too. Why do I kind of like it too? Yeah, these teams played like 6 common opponents. You can clearly tell the Penn State run defense is much better than, you can just look at the metrics, is much better than the Oregon run defense. I mean, look at the Purdue ran for 240 on Oregon. Look at Wisconsin. Or, I mean, you can go down the list. Illinois. I think Illinois had like 32 rushes for 32 yards against Penn State and 32 rushes for 132 yards against Oregon. Don't quote me on that. I think it's somewhere in that ballpark. The Oregon run defense is vulnerable. Do I think Penn State can run the ball? Yes. That's the whole key to this, because if they can't, Aller in known passing situations will be bad because Oregon's pass D is good. They don't have a ton of all-stars in the back end, but they're all solid, and they can get a pass rush without having to send guys. So if they know that there's, then you could send a linebacker in there. If you know it's a passing situation, Penn State doesn't have the receivers to beat that. Mm-hmm. But I do think Penn State can run the ball. That's the key here. We'll see if Anthony Donka, the right tackle, being out is detrimental, because Oregon does have really good pass rushers led by Birch. Nolan Rucci to Wisconsin transfer. He'll step in. He started last week. Donka's had other injuries earlier this year, so he's played, but he's not as good. It's a drop-off. How big? We'll see. He played well last week, but it was Maryland. The Penn State offense, it's really just all about the scheme. Aller's playing better. You have Warren, the ultimate chess piece. He'll play quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver. And then Wallace is like your only legit wide receiver. This offense really lacks explosiveness. Mm-hmm. Got to drive it down the field. Got to be able to run it. I think they're going to run it here. If they're not, they're going to lose. The other side of the ball, I think the Penn State defense is elite. You got Carter, Harris, King at all 3 levels that lead that unit. You cannot run on them. You have to hit explosive passes on them through the air. But the Oregon offense is just, I know they got Tez Johnson back. He's the key to this game, but they really lack explosiveness. The run, pass game. I don't think they're going to run it. They're going to be in known passing situations. I think Penn State can get pressure. You pressure Gabriel, his numbers fall off a cliff. It's been like that way his entire career. Oregon does have really good tackles. I still have some questions about the interior of that defensive line. So I don't think James is going to have a ton of success in the ground. And I think Penn State can pressure Gabriel in known passing situations. So, yeah, I think this comes down to Penn State will have more success running the ball. I make it around 2. I'm going to take 3.5. And by the way, Oregon's faced 2 good offenses all year. Is that it?
Yeah.
2?
Yeah.
Boise and Ohio State. Boise put up 34 and lost by 3 at Oregon. Ohio State put up 31 and lost by 1 at Oregon. So the only 2 good offenses they faced all year, both at home, one by one by 3. They had 2 kick returns for touchdown against Boise. I know it's a different team now, but they probably should have lost that game, and they easily could have lost the game to Ohio State. So, yeah, I mean, it's a team a couple weeks ago that barely beat Wisconsin. We're back on the Lanning fade train. I've gotten them Let's see. I didn't fade him this week. I'm getting you this week, Dan. Small game, James. Give me the hook.
I'm so uncomfortable with this, but I like Penn State. I'm so uncomfortable with this. Look, a
Put
lot
it
of
on the
things.
board.
Oh yeah, put it on the board. And you put UNLV. Well, I guess that doesn't count, but yeah, put this one on the board. Let me go ahead and say, like, Nick Singleton is running so much better for Penn State right now during the second half of the season. He had
Yeah, it's huge.
a
He wasn't healthy.
sagging, yeah, he had a sagging number in yards after first contact for the first 4 to 6 games. I remember we handicapped that big time against Ohio State. Like, what happened to the Nick Singleton that was averaging like 5 yards after first contact? He's beefed it up to 3.5 yards. So he is returned. Kotelnicki's best results for success rate explosives all year has been the power run concept with heavy pre-snap motion. You're going to see that here. Oregon's about 50% success rate in defending most run concepts, but they're terrible in short yardage situation. Defensively, 114th in stuff rate. That means Penn State is going to get every first down that they want on short yardage stuff. I think Tyler Warren is the X factor here. He is Brock Bowers. He is what Brock Bowers was to Georgia. He's lined up over 50 times on the line with the offensive lineman as a wideout in the slot. He's all over the place. And why do I mention that being a huge factor here? Because Oregon's defense went up against Colston Loveland of Michigan. And Colston Loveland hauled in 7 of 9 passes. The Ducks threw multiple defenders in the zone at Loveland and just could not force a contested catch. So Tyler Warren's usage here is critical. Kotelnicki's job should be graded on what Warren does in this spot because Penn State should have success. Because if Oregon can't defend Colston Loveland and telegraphing what Warren Davis is doing, I mean, come on. This is a much better offense with Tyler Warren. Okay, so on that side of the ball, Warren should have himself a day. I'd hit some props, rushing props, receiving props. When you go to the other side of the ball, you say, well, Oregon's going to have the offense going. Tez Johnson's going to be back. He caught all 3 of his targets that he had against Washington last week. I'm a little wishy-washy on Gabriel's numbers, only because like you read off his 1.4% turnover worthy play rate, and then you realize he has the lowest average depth of target of his career at 7 yards. Like we just got pea shooters out there dinking and dunking over the line of scrimmage. Penn State is going to have some success, I think, also defending Jordan James. I mean, Oregon is all about zone read, inside, outside zone read. And the Nittany Lions are the second best defense in the nation. This is the stat that led me to Penn State, especially defensively. Only one defense is better than Penn State in allowing red zone rushing touchdowns. It's Iowa, right? You do not rush for touchdowns against Penn State. That is really bad for Jordan James. I think there's potential for him to get stopped at the goal line. I think there's potential for failed red zones here. Dane Lanning is such a gambler. 4th and 3, doesn't matter what field position is.
Give me some more Gabriel red zone picks under pressure too.
I see Dan Lanning overplaying his hand and Penn State catching him. And if Kotelnicki wants to earn his money, he needs to get Tyler Warren in multiple places and create a little bit of chaos against a secondary that's going to pin their ears back and come after Drew Aller. By the way, stat for Drew Aller, does not have a single turnover worthy play in 100 pressures this season, 100 dropbacks with pressure. I think that all plays out here. Plus, we said it before we started hitting record. Oregon ain't coming out in those Buckeye colors, right? Penn State's going to be fine here. Penn State's going to be fine.
We are on the board. Small game, James, but this isn't a big game. By the way, I think Oregon will be better off if they lose this game. Especially if the 5 seed breaks right and your path is easier. But not being undefeated, getting refocused, Lanning can use that as fuel before the college football playoff. You might get an easier path. You know, it's kind of narrative-y, but they might be better off if they lose. They're not going to obviously try to win. But all right, one more game, the ACC Championship, Saturday night, 8 Eastern on ABC in Charlotte. We started off our preseason pods, Colin touting SMU. Good call. Me touting Clemson.
Yep, good call.
Thanks to Miami and Syracuse. Shout out Fran Brown. Thank God Syracuse went over their win total. At least they then did me a solid and got Clemson into the ACC title. Dabo, by the way, has won 8 straight ACC championships. But here we are. Both of our teams. We'll see if we go head to head. SMU, 2.5-point favorite here. I think they opened some places as a 3-point underdog. Total 55.5. All right, so I'm conflicted on this game. I'll tell you, I make it a pick.
Mhm.
But if I can get three with Clemson, I don't know if I'm going to hedge yet. I have Clemson playoff futures, ACC futures. Here, what I struggle with is SMU hasn't really played anybody. Their schedule's been soft, but Clemson has. But every time that they played someone with a pulse, they've lost. So where does SMU fit? I mean, they could have easily beat South Carolina, but at the end of the day, they didn't. The Clemson offensive line is now all back, but how healthy are they? I don't know. They dealt with some injuries. They were shifting tackles. They had injuries at guard. They at least have all their guys back. We'll see how healthy they are against that SMU pass rush. The Clemson defense has some players, Terrell, Mickens, Carter, Woodaz, Brown, Parker off the edge. But as a whole, their numbers are not Clemson-like, especially against the run. Like 64th success rate, outside the top 100 in EPA per rush. You can get them on the ground. But SMU's offense, their rush offense is not efficient. And they have a really good back in Rashard Smith, but they don't really hit explosives on the ground. And a lot of it's just they don't run block. Their run blocking is not great. And Clemson gives up a ton of run explosives. So
Yeah,
what
it doesn't
gives
have to
there?
be. Does it have to be in this game?
Yeah,
Clemson's
that's the key. Like, can SMU get it going? Because their offensive line took a big step back this year, particularly at center. And I mean, they lost Hickman, and then who else did they lose? I think they lost their. I mean, both their guards came back. They lost both tackles. Their right tackle's been good. Their left tackle's been a disaster. But their run blocking as a whole has not been good. This is like you haven't seen SMU as like a power spread team. They air raid principles, want to spread you out, go fast, tempo, especially after first downs. A lot of 11 personnel, mesh concepts. There's the Malzahn tree. I mean, Brett Lashley was with Malzahn from high school, I think. He's an assistant. Was that true? Was he in high school with where Malzahn was? I think so. And then he was with him at Auburn and and then he went to Miami. He was at UConn a year. For what it's worth, Dabo did get the better of Lashley and shut down his offense in his two previous stops at Auburn and Miami. But Clemson had much better defenses and they had a much better defensive staff at the time.
with Venables.
Yeah, with Venables there. And yeah, so that's interesting. The Clemson secondary is much better than the run D, which I think is important here. Can Jennings take advantage? Or will he finally miss RJ Maryland? The wide receiver room won't wow you with talent, but it's really solid and really deep. You can't just focus on any one guy to take them away. They just have a lot of depth there, and it's a well-schemed offense. On the other side of the ball, the SMU run D is really good. Their safeties are great. They're deep there. McGill, Kobe, their run D is just outstanding. They're top 5 EPA per rush. They got a good D line full of power forward transfers. I mean, but it's like ex-Miami players. Harrison Hunt, Harvey, Elijah Roberts is a stud. They all used to be at Miami. Good linebackers, Walker and Wilson. And then those safeties, you can stop the run. They get sacks. They get tackles for loss. You have to beat their corners. That's the weakness. It's outside at corner, outside top 100 in pass explosiveness allowed. They really miss Charles Woods at corner. He's now with the Rams. Klubnik's good deep thrower.
Mhm.
Can their wide receivers win on the outside? That's what I think this game comes down to for Clemson. Can Wesco and Moore step up, help out Williams? That's going to be the key here. Can they win those battles? And then can Clemson protect Klubnik enough? How healthy is that offensive line? Can they stop that SMU pass rush, that SMU defensive line who can really get into the backfield? I do think ultimately maybe Clemson is just better equipped to take advantage of SMU's pass explosive D issues than SMU can the rush explosive issues, but I don't know. I don't have a ton of great data points with SMU. They've also played a lot of teams with a lot of injuries on defense in the secondary. Jennings also doesn't really run much, and we saw how many issues Clemson had last week with Sellers. I do also believe Clemson has all the intangible benefits. House money. They didn't think they were going to be here. Renewed sense of life. They're playing in Charlotte. They have the coaching experience being in an ACC championship. SMU really heavily penalized team. Clemson not. I think SMU's 130th penalties, Clemson 35th. Games in Charlotte, as I mentioned. SMU does have a special teams edge. That could matter in a close game. But I'm conflicted on this game, but I do make it a coin flip. Would lean Clemson. Undecided on the hedge. Would bet Clemson at 3.
Yeah, for those of you that have like 20, 22 to ones on SMU out there, like I do, I did a 4X on Clemson on the +2 with the points with the hopes of middling that. So,
Clemson missed the extra point at the
yeah,
end.
yeah, anything like that is going to be a huge day from the Wilson house. Um, I think everything you said is legitimately the handicap on both sides of the ball because Clemson, I just don't see them being able to run the ball. I mean, SMU has a 57% success rate defensively against the inside zone and counter that Clemson likes to run. I don't think Phil Maffa and Cade Klubnik running those run concepts are going to have any kind of success whatsoever. I mean,
And I
Clemson,
just don't think their offensive line's going to get great push either.
right. And SMU's top 25 in defending rush EPA. Like, I just don't think you're going to get anything big here. And when you go to the throw game of Klubnik, that's where SMU does a lot of cover three. They do a lot of quarters, and Klubnik's about mid FBS against that. And I think Bryant Wesco is going to be the biggest part of this offense. I think he's the one that can take advantage of an SMU defense that is almost just barely slipped in the top 50 and defend and creating contested catches. So the Clemson targets should have clean balls and should have space to make something happen. I just don't think it's going to be enough because on the other side of the ball, Clemson is so atrocious in defending rush explosives. And Brashard Smith is just on a mission here. 13% of their rushing attempts have an explosive play. The zone read here is going to be what they look for. And, you mentioned RJ Maryland.
He's dangerous. Watch him out of the backfield, too. He's
Yeah.
like the passing game.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's working in favor, Kevin Jennings, by the way, could play shortstop for most Major League Baseball teams. I think he could throw a baseball probably 105 miles an hour. He's got a freaking rocket arm. When
Well, the
RJ
biggest difference that Jennings has provided, like I mentioned, he doesn't run,
right,
is that the offensive line is not as good. The left tackle's been a disaster. Center's not as good. His mobility in just navigating the pressure that SMU can allow at times and dealing with that and then getting the ball downfield, buying time, something that Stone couldn't. That's one of the things that jump started SMU after the bye when they made the full quarterback switch. His mobility and ability to evade sacks and pressures in the pocket because this offensive line has taken a step back from last year.
right.
That's been the biggest difference with Jennings. And
Well,
yeah, he does have a rocket arm.
you mentioned RJ Maryland going down earlier in the season for SMU. He was the top target on the team, no doubt. But there might be a star in the making here because wide receiver Roderick Daniels started filling out the slot and becoming the main guy, 2.2 yards per route run. That is explosive. Early downs have not been great for Clemson on defense. That gives me a lot of positive signal that SMU, who is ninth in the country in offensive momentum killer, is going to be able to just simply have methodical drives and mix in a couple of explosives. I like SMU a lot here. I mean, futures aside, everything aside, I think SMU should be favored over a field goal. So I like SMU here in the points.
Let's go ahead to Might as well go head to head one more time.
Are we just doing my future as your future, or do I got to swallow the two? This
Yeah, you
land,
gotta swallow. Yeah, you gotta swallow the two. I mean, you have 22 to 1. I don't know that good, so I'm gonna make you swallow the two.
how is the 22 to 1 minus 2?
2.5. Making you swallow 2.5. That's the current number.
I mean, I need this because the hate on SMU the first month of our podcasting was bad. I need this win.
I need this so I can laugh at you again. It's a Dabo podcast, baby. All right, that'll do it for us. All 9 games, conference championship weekend, broken down. The board, transparency, Penn State on the agree. 32-21 on the year, over 60%. Head-to-head, Colin leads. SMU versus Clemson, as it should be. Trash finished 21-12, by the way, 63.7%. No more trash this year. It will be back last year. And thank you for the reviews, by the way. There were enough reviews that we will be keeping the transparency board moving forward, be a staple of the show. Appreciate those reviews. Make sure you subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Go to our YouTube channel, BBOC. Make sure you hit the subscribe button there, even if you don't listen. Live show, 10:30 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. Group of 5 guys. Make sure you check out their episode. We'll be back with our first bowl preview early next week because there's a bowl next Saturday with the Army-Navy game. That'll do it for us. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck on any pending futures, all of your bets this weekend. Let's have a weekend. Cheers.
Peace out.